I brought a few books, and I wanted to put them there on the altar, but I'll just do that symbolically in my mind. It's just as good anyway, right? Some books that have been very meaningful to me as I studied, not knowing that this would become a talk for you all one day, but it did. The Spiritual Lives of Children by Carol Bowman. See, I better bring them out here afterwards. I can't remember right now. So, my topic is reincarnation. And before we start, I just want to define for us all, what is that? What are we talking about exactly? It is the rebirth of a soul that has died in one body and goes to another. That's simple. This topic, however, the word, the meaning, it made no sense to me when I was a child, because just like any other fact or fiction, I would bring to the adults in my community and ask questions. Well, what does this mean? How does that happen? No one knew exactly. I thought, okay, that's a faulty concept. Put it away. And I did for many years. My village of adults did know the intricacies of how people get to heaven, however. And they knew what they do when they live there. And they knew how all that time was going to be spent through eternity. So that was my village. So I don't know where any of you are on this topic. And this is part of the daring that I think I love in the Interfaith Center. That I believe we can put out a topic that we will not agree on. Because there are so many different opinions, even written in the world about this topic. So let's just assume that as a community. If we find some commonality, that's fine, doesn't matter that much. But if we find some help in living our lives through our discussions of it together, then that's what we want to do. I'm not sure that the Course in Miracles got read this morning. Is that true? You did not read it? Okay. So Nicholas and I discussed this ahead of time. And so I read what the Course in Miracles has to say about reincarnation. And now that I see they take no position on the offset, but they do say if it's helpful, then go ahead and believe in it. If it's not helpful, let it go. And I thought, well, how good an opinion this is for about everything, right? Right? So in my wondering about why people don't talk much about it here, a lot of us do study the Course in Miracles, and so I think a lot of us are following that. But I think I'm following it too. Our first responsibility is to be helpful for each other. Beyond that reason for bringing it up, I have only one more, and that is to hope we find the spiritual maturity in ourselves to let each other agree to disagree. Well, when I was a child, I found disagreements to be very uncomfortable. I feel a huge heaviness when I disagreed with someone. And so first in my childlikeness, I would try and convince them of my opinion. Then I grew a little older, I knew that was impolite. So I tried to convince myself of their opinion. It didn't work either. So maturity is a great thing, isn't it? Not that I'm there, oh my gosh, no. No, in fact, I might get upset when I find someone differing than I, especially if it's a relative, or something. But that's part of my journey. And I'm just enjoying allowing other opinions. So I hope you'll allow me mine too. In fact, it's really not an opinion, it's just a belief that I think I've been led to that's important. So, listening to other opinions, allowing, accepting them. Well, this exploration of reincarnation in our culture takes a lot of courage and a steady opening. You won't believe how many people will not talk to me about it. Or maybe you would. Maybe you're one of them. It's okay. But I believe there's a great deal of spiritual growth to be found from the topic. So what I found, past life memories don't pop up for no reason. The human organism knows innately what will be helpful. I mean, maybe that's why you folks have sought out being here, right? Among a million other things. Somewhere we have a knowing that brings us where we need to be. Here at Interfaith, we don't have to explain the interworld and the outer world, but this is important to my talk. So let's consider that there, not to make dualism happening here, but there is an inner world and an outer world, and I believe that they are connected by the sensory, whether it's the five senses, other senses we haven't labeled yet, or just feelings. I think the two worlds are connected. And that's why our feelings are so important, right? So we can connect up the spiritual and the temporal. Several months back, I wrote in a newsletter. Who reads the news? Who read my article in the newsletter? That would be helpful to know right now. Okay, yes, thank you. Chase, the little boy that I wrote about in that article, had flashbacks of his life as a soldier for the first time when he was hearing fireworks going off. I don't remember if he was 2 or 3 or 4, but he was very young. He could walk, but he also fit in his mother's arms at that point. It reminded him of his previous life when he was actually in a war getting wounded. The trauma continued every time he heard loud noises, and it didn't bother him just a little. He was frantic at times. Even though he could walk away from what was giving him this trouble, he would lie down, kick, and scream. He was beside himself until he was removed from that agitation. Chase was a carefree little boy who loved cake and swimming and running as fast as he could. But at these times of upset, which occurred again and again, he was incorrigible. He was inconsolable. His parents, however, were already interested in past life regression therapy, and it just happened in remarkable timing that a therapist was to come to stay at their home while he gave talks in the outlying areas. And so when this crisis happened in their family with Chase, she spoke with this therapist about it. And how easily he just brought Chase into the conversation. He said, "Sit on your mother's lap now and relax. Tell me what you see when you hear the loud voices that scare you." Well, in just a short time of getting out all the words he had in his mind in a loving and caring place, Chase let it out, and he never again had that trauma. In fact, Chase went on to be in the school band, and guess what instrument he chose? Percussion, the drums. Okay. This boy is over it. Sarah also had a phobia, but it expressed itself more within her for years until it came out. It was fire that terrified Sarah. She claimed that it was always there as long as she could remember. But one time it raised its head when her parents could not ignore it. She stayed overnight with a friend, and before bed, they watched a movie together that included a house fire. She cried at the time, as many people do in movies when someone's in danger. But thinking about the movie made it hard for her to sleep that night. And the next day when she came home, her eyes were still red from crying. Her parents, of course, asked, "What's wrong?" And she told them all about the movie. Well, at that point, it just seemed very strange to her family. But she mentioned also that for a long time, she had hidden under her bed in a bag fresh clothing and her favorite dolls. In case there was a fire at her home, she could make her departure quickly. Sarah was actually brought herself, or asked to go to the same therapist that Chase saw. The therapist told her, "Close your eyes. Now feel the fear you have of fire, and tell me what you see." Sarah told her therapist and her mother who was present that she saw an old-fashioned house and herself at 10 or 11 years old. The therapist then asked her to move ahead to the time when her fear of the fire started. She began to speak in the present voice. "I wake up suddenly and I smell smoke. I know the house is on fire. I'm scared, I'm panicked, I can't think. I jump out of bed. Flames and smoke are everywhere." She went on to relate that when she looked in her parents' room, she found that beds were made and no one was around. A flaming beam just then fell right in front of her, and she couldn't get out of the house. As she struggled to even breathe, her last thoughts were of her parents and why they didn't come and get her out of the fire. The therapist encouraged her at that point. "What are you experiencing now, Sarah?" And this is what she said. "I'm floating above the treetops. I guess I'm dead. I feel no pain." She also related that she now saw her family on the ground, absolutely devastated that they could not save their daughter. In this moment, Sarah realized she was part of a loving family, and they would have done anything they could have to get her out. And this was the kernel of truth that Sarah needed to relieve her trauma. For the next day, Sarah unpacked that bag of clothes and dolls that was under her bed. Her fear of fire disappeared, and to this day, however, she is very careful when she lights a match. This type of evidence of past lives often appears from children. And why? It's my thought that perhaps since their new lives are just beginning, it's easier for them to see through the veil between life and death to their past life. Quite naturally, these memories tend to fade as one grows older. But all over the world, and this is documented, children in a trusting way tell their parents that they lived another life. Many times they can report the year, many times they can report their name, and these things have been looked up and verified. Not just in one country, around the globe. But the element that seems to be the thing that they hold in common is that they have a death that was very unusual, very traumatic. That death seems to be like an electric storm that just makes its way through crinkles and jabs into the next lives. Now there is evidence if this goes unrecognized, it can cause illness, anxiety, unaccounted for emotions, and social adjustment problems. It can pepper these new lives with unexplained, incurable eczema that has been cured when the memories come back, or other abnormalities in the body, or emotional troubles. Why is it so difficult to speak about these things that might really be of help to people? I think that we have a reticence to bring up things that will make us disagree in our society. And so we all want to make a calm appearance and not shake up anyone else. And that's a good thing. But I think there might be some other reasons too, like our history. Carol Bowman, in Past Life Experiences of Children, says that there was a time when people believed this all over, quite possibly. She finds evidence in different faith traditions that they disagree, but they have a lot about reincarnation in them. In fact, before the rise of Christianity, it's estimated that most people believed in reincarnation. However, there was a time when popes took control and would do anything to hold on to their power. And this itself is another sermon, so I won't go further into that. But I firmly believe that there may be keys within past life experiences, as there has been in my own life, to find my own balance. And I asked my past life regression therapist to attend our service today. Tom Horniak is not a stranger to us, but I'm so happy that he planned to come. He was a very helpful person to me, and I know he will be in the future too. I'm learning to notice that when I have problems that have no answer or logic to this mind, that I need to look further. And I have found some astounding things through that journey. I wonder though if we couldn't talk about it more, if we would find more understanding for the life that we see around us today. And I have not read about these things. These now are solely my own thoughts. But bisexuality is something that's to the foreground, given we are now in a place where we can accept much more, and we tell people to be real and to talk about what's on your mind, as probably not in the past few centuries anyway. But I just think that perhaps the memories we have from previous lives are so within us by the time we get to where we are now, that we may remember being both a man and a woman. In fact, I remember this. And maybe this is bringing us to a knowledge of some more truth. And for me, that truth might be that we are all on a continuum of sexuality, that we all have the possibility of being heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. And that continuum is a long one. And any of us could be anywhere. And further, I would say it's okay and acceptable to express where you are on that sexual continuum. The other thing that I think might be helpful to us as we see autism and the spectrum of autism coming up in our children so much more. And I just wonder if the compounding of memories over so many, many years doesn't just have a hard time functioning in our brains. And there is so much there that we can't contain it all unless we train ourselves to only express this part of our brains. If we don't feel acceptable when we don't, or if we do talk about past lives, maybe it sends such a conflict through our systems that we have to ignore. We have to ignore. Just like many circumstances in life, when fear and the ego comes to cloud our circumstances or our thoughts will go underground. And when that happens, it's a red flag that something needs to come out. And it will be significant when it does. If we do become a society where it becomes acceptable to speak freely of past life memories, and people can do it without fear of reprisals or mocking or abuse, what might be the outcome? We have some demonstration of what might happen. In Beirut, Lebanon, where Ian Stevenson did his research, people, when convinced that a relative who died now currently lives in another body, they are willing to assume all responsibilities for that person being their family. And this doesn't mean asking them over to dinner now and then. It does mean that sometimes, that you want to see if that person needs somewhere to go on a holiday, but the responsibilities might mount up to a considerable expense, like taking care of them in their old age. Like being responsible for their deaths. This practice is perfectly respectable in other countries. So, I don't know where we'll go as a society. I have no idea. For myself, as a previous evangelical Christian, coming to an understanding of reincarnation as I have, it's been like approaching a spider web in the morning when it's covered with dew. I could swear I walked right by there last night and that cobweb was not there. But here it is, I can't deny it, in all its beauty. It's a work of art. It sparkles in the daylight. Wow. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So that sums up my entire purpose, being here, bringing this up. Knowing the truth by its very nature should set us free. And freedom is the only way to live an abundant and happy life. And let's usher that in, okay?